God bless. This is Mark Anthony DeBello. This is NFL Moneyball. For more information on the program and the system, the NFL Extended Strategic Principles System, you can go to the website at nfl-esp.com. Or for more information on myself and the system, you can go to markanthonydebello.com and just click on the Sports tab. This program is going to run 30 minutes. I'm going to play a montage in the background, and I can only hope and pray that the distribution becomes wider on the World Wide Web. It makes no sense to me how few hits there are and people listening to the program, especially since it's been so accurate since its outset. We're in NFL Week 8 coming up, so I'm going to cover the first half of the program with a lot of commentary this week on some things going on in the NFL, and then as I've done in the second half of the program, go over the power spread information for those who might have an investment or financial interest in it and how it relates to the NFL ESP system and how you might prognosticate or predict the games this weekend from that standpoint. But again, NFL ESP is designed to help NFL coaches with their basic strategy decisions and increase a team's win productivity by 10 to 15% per regular season. And we cover the four basic areas of spirit, motivation, X's and O's, which is play design and play coordination and such, and then the power spread, which again is valuable to those who have a financial interest. So let me go over some commentary and then get into last week and before transitioning into this week. A few things I'm noticing in the NFL from the NFL ESP standpoint and system, and I'm making this recording following again the game on Thursday night between San Diego and Denver, whereby Denver defeated San Diego by more than the power spread which was listed and by more than our listed power spread. And I can tell you the first reason Denver did that was they got a tremendous, and they already were a 4-point home field advantage team. They got a tremendous amount of home field advantage this week, which I've seen a lot in lately this season or all season with regards to NFL teams. They're getting a lot of biased home officiating calls, which really make a big difference, especially the timeliness of these calls, which is part of the NFL ESP system and what we track. And again, I saw a few even in instant replay play that was erroneously called in Denver's favor, which would have resulted in a San Diego turnover at the end of the first half and perhaps giving them a 10-7 lead. And again, I've seen that a lot throughout the NFL, and the home field advantage this season is more than the 4.5 points of the max, which was a team like Seattle, and then 4 points a team like Denver. Some of it has to do with the pass interference and defensive holding calls. The reps were told to crack down. I met with Mike Carey last year at the MIT Sports Analytics Conference. We discussed this briefly, and that extra bias already has blanketed itself across the league and to the teams that are more popular and certainly the home teams, and I found it to be overly biased. So you want to begin to really follow the rest of the season looking at the home teams and not just those calls, but again the timeliness of those calls and how it really factors into the advantage a team has, and then certainly the advantage with the power spread. So if I talk to a coach like Coach Pressman, I can't tell him enough how his team, Chicago, needs to be able to make sure they manufacture these calls, and we have a system of how to work the referees, in order to have that, make sure that it comes into play. So the other thing I'll note about the Denver game and San Diego game, which is generally just the broadcast, NFL ESP, part of its design is to be able to tell networks like the NFL Network, CBS on Thursday night games, ESPN on Monday night games, which games will be the most competitive, have the most interest, and that's a lot of that's determined by player record quests like Peyton Manning had last week, or the power spread, or the division standings, or the projections of what will be at the end of the year from the beginning of the year, so you don't have any, matchups between one team much more dominant than the other, and with, no apparent, interest in the standings or playoffs for the other team. So that's a huge difference with regards to viewership. And I see a broadcast, and here's just two minor points that just are quite annoying to me. Number one is Phil Simms. I think he's just an egotistical, arrogant. I've heard him take the Lord's name in vain on a telecast once. He never seems to confess he's wrong, and he always thinks he's more self-righteous than Jim Nantz there in the booth. And the other thing I'll say about announcers, which I would love to see somebody cover it from an NFL ESP perspective as I do, or at least have a segment or an input, just like they bring Mike Carey in, who, like I said, I've met, but doesn't do a very good job, if you ask me, as far as the referee. The other gentleman does, the first person, I forget his name, who was always in the booth, Perella or something like that. He does a good job, Mike or whatever his name is, but Carey, not so much. But again, here's the other problem that I have is every player isn't eligible or going to be in the Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame already is too diluted. I just only have to look to the NBA to see that Dennis Rodman is in there to not ever give any more credibility or integrity to the NBA Hall of Fame. And I also think now in the NFL, it's just too much pop culture, too much cross, the game to being somebody who is an announcer and then somebody who is also, a pop culture figure, or even is, gets a lot of publicity for whatever reasons. And again, I'm tired of hearing announcers say every player is destined for Canton, they're going to be in the Hall of Fame. There needs to be more selectivity and just more high quality and class in there, and less diluted for sure. The other two notes I have here are about, I mentioned parity with regards to how home field advantage is really advantageous to teams. In the NFL this season, believe it or not, although the NFL always talks a lot of parity, and it is a very balanced league, and it should be, and it probably always will be. There's certain teams that are already mini dynasties, if you will, like the Patriots and the Broncos in a small way now, or becoming a very good team, or at least a very consistently high-ranked team, is that there is no, it's very bipolar this year, very polarized, the parity as far as I see. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm just noting it, that the top 16 teams in the league are much better than the bottom 16, and they can be clearly defined. And I'll give you a quick list here of the top 16 teams, and these have been the top 16 since the beginning of the season, and will be the top 16 probably, well, surely to the end of the year, with probably maybe positions 15 and 16 alternating a little bit, just based on injuries and how the season goes, and coaching decisions and things to that effect, and certainly how the data reveals itself. But if I had to list the top teams in the league, and again, I noted this last week, and you'll see this in the results that we posted, NFL ESP posted last week, is that the AFC is really now, I think, turned the tides on the NFC. Or turn the tide. I didn't know it was going to happen this short a time. The NFC was dominant for probably about 10 years, the way I saw it, and then the AFC was dominant for 10 years, and then the NFC took over for about the last 3 or 4, and I thought maybe they could get more than 5 years of dominance, but now it looks like it's gone back to the AFC and some of the more traditional teams and power teams over there. So basically right now I have the power rankings without a lot of study, just a sort of cursory look. But it looks to me to be, and I'll just run them down in order: Denver, Baltimore, Indy, New England, Seattle, Arizona, Detroit, Green Bay, San Diego, Kansas City, San Francisco, Carolina, Philadelphia, Dallas, Cincinnati, and New Orleans. Now, at the bottom of the list, you can probably toss in a team like Chicago. There's probably a couple other teams, maybe Buffalo you can throw in there in that 16th spot. But again, and the teams below that are all very nominal, poor, just not very quality teams as it relates to the entire NFL. And a lot of that I know has to do with strategy decisions as NFL ESP is concerned, and I know that NFL ESP could really help these teams. And then you probably noticed rank some teams more low than probably people think. Even though I'm cognizant of a team like Cincinnati's and Dallas's and Philadelphia's record, even Carolina, these are two of the weaker divisions, the NFC South and the NFC East. Doesn't mean a team can't be 7-1 or 6-2 and lead their division or be second in their division, but the power rating will come out by the time the playoffs come or near the end of the season. And these are the teams that get beat first round in the playoffs by 3 or 4 or 5 touchdowns or more. That many, yes, because they're just in the weaker divisions. And I've already mentioned the weakest divisions in the NFL this year. Basically, the NFC East, the NFC Central, the NFC South, and then you can even go to the AFC North and even the AFC South. Now, I'll take a couple of top teams, and they're very strong, like Indianapolis is strong. Detroit and Green Bay, they're strong. I'll give Carolina tops in their division, kind of through New Orleans in at 16, as I mentioned, and then Dallas and Philly both from the NFC East, and Cincy barely made the chart. And again, I haven't had Cincinnati in the top 10 all season long, and now that's coming to fruition, and you're seeing them come back down to where they probably should be as far as NFL ESP prognosticated them, or predicted them. So anyway, that's the commentary for this week. And let me get to now last week and some of the games and some thoughts, and then and knock that out here in about 3 minutes, and then get to the second half of the program for those of you who have a mind to invest. Okay, so last week, the Thursday night game, that's a power spread of too many points to give the Jets. I honestly was wrong. I thought New England would go through the number, but 9 points top to bottom in that division is way too many. That's a pretty balanced division this year, and as I projected at the beginning of the year, New England will win the division basically by default because Miami, Buffalo, and the Jets especially, I thought the Jets could get second place, but their quarterback, they need a new quarterback there or a new system, but really they need a new quarterback. I like the system. They just don't run the quarterback enough. That's his best attribute, and it's the thing he does the least. Anyway, so last week from top to bottom, we loved Indianapolis over Cincinnati. That was a blowout, a commanding performance by Indy as we projected, since he was hugely overrated. I thought Washington could go through the number with Tennessee, but those are basically equally ranked divisions, the NFC East and the AFC South, and Tennessee kept that game close. I still think Kirk Cousins is a better quarterback than Colt McCoy and will be better in the long run, but he's a rookie and he's playing like a rookie, and Washington's just not that good team. The Bears, Coach Trestman, I couldn't tell him enough how he needs to do different decisions. He doesn't do them, so God bless and forgive him, but their Bears are coming out right where we thought they would be, 7-9, 8-8 at the end of the season, and I think I had about a 30% chance to be 9-7. So they're going to be in a three-way still, I think, by the end of the year, unless something, coach makes a big move. But as it stands now, they're looking at third place or right. I still think they'll be right there with Detroit and Green Bay. So that'll be three-way right to the end. As we projected, Jacksonville upset Cleveland. Covered with the power spread, Cleveland. Now I hope they can see how they can really use Johnny Manziel. They didn't generate any offense. And again, as I projected, Cleveland would be a dynamically better team if they would have Johnny Manziel starting at quarterback. They're still a very good team, but they're costing themselves probably 6, 7, 8 points a game on average just by not going with Johnny Manziel. St. Louis upset Seattle. In a bit of surprise, nobody thought Seattle could, lose the power spread that game. But I will say this is a perfect example of NFL ESP and what it can do. And as a matter of fact, I only need 10 minutes to go over the schedule for next week. So give me 20 minutes to cover this quote-unquote first half of the program, and then I'll get into the investments for this week in the last 10 minutes. St. Louis and Seattle, this is a perfect example of how NFL ESP works. And I said this to Coach Trestman, that Seattle outgained St. Louis by 200 yards, and the turnovers were equal, and yet St. Louis won the game. And they won the game because of three basic special teams, but aggressive, manufactured type NFL ESP point plays. They returned a kickoff from their -6-yard line and got a 75-yard kickoff return on it. They ran a fake punt. That's the best special teams play I've seen in 10 years, and it was the same exact virtual play that Chicago ran against Green Bay, but got called back on a penalty about 2 years ago. This time St. Louis ran it to perfection and scored, and then they ran a fake punt on fourth down in their own territory late in the game, which gained them the possession because Seattle would have gone down, kicked the field goal, and won that game. There's probably about a 75% chance or better of that. So that was the best game thus far, showing the NFL ESP system on how you need to make these aggressive basic strategy decisions to win games, and that they trump turnovers, it trumps home field advantage, and it trumps quarterback, the running by the quarterback. And the quarterback production, you often hear me call QB time in the pocket or out of the pocket or for rushing yards. So a great job by St. Louis there. I thought Carolina would keep it close against Green Bay. I couldn't have been more wrong. Carolina is now feeling the effects of that hard schedule, getting injured, wearing out on defense. Really going to have problems for the rest of the year, and they'll be in a toss-up with New Orleans to the end of that division, but I still think they'll nip New Orleans, even though, again, that's probably 50-50. As we prognosticate at the beginning of the year, maybe 60-40 or 55-45 Carolina. Green Bay is doing much better than I thought they would be doing, and again, that's all Aaron Rodgers and his ability in the X's and O's and their turnover ratio. They've got, I think, plus 21 on our NFL ESP turnover chart this year. Baltimore ran right through the number on Atlanta as we projected, with laying 7 points in the power spread, and as we clearly projected, and they really were more dominant in that game as they had turnovers and still won. Minnesota-Buffalo we thought was going to be a 50-50 toss-up. It couldn't have been any closer since Buffalo scored on the last play to win, so Minnesota covered on the power spread. Who we liked? We liked New Orleans against the power and the power spread against Detroit. With the first power spread of 2.5 points, New Orleans did cover that game, and I'm not even concerned with the Drew Brees turnover. Those things happen. They can be predicted and projected. And again, in a tight game, New Orleans won, and that's the way we saw it. We also saw Kansas City covering the game. Again, the word cover, intimates that it's have a financial interest in the game. I'm not giving you purist NFL ESP data because I know most people it's beyond their comprehension and too complex to understand. But San Diego, as I'll say quote unquote feared, is coming back to where, showing their strength of schedule, that was the reason they were doing so well in the one-loss column at the beginning of the year, especially now on the heels of losing to Kansas City and Denver, two teams in their own division. So, and again, that's a close division. Denver clearly the number one power spread team, and San Diego would have kept it a lot closer if they didn't have those bad calls and turnovers, but again, not surprisingly, Kansas City covered in the power spread there. Thought the Giants could keep it close against Dallas. Dallas, yes, definitely, certainly to me is a surprise at 7-1. And I still don't think they're going to be near there at the end. And I know the Giants aren't until Ryan Nassib gets in, and even then they're going to have problems. So, but not surprisingly, Dallas ran through the number there and defeated the Giants. Oakland against Arizona. Carson Palmer, again, is a very good quarterback. I think one of the more accurate, if not the most accurate quarterback in the league next to Peyton Manning. They're 1-2 as far as I see it. And not surprisingly, Arizona covered Oakland. But don't underestimate Oakland. They're not, they're a bad team, believe me. Them and Jacksonville are clearly the two worst teams in the NFL. But Arizona is doing, as we projected, very well and are playoff bound as it looks right now. We projected that at the beginning of the season. San Fran played Denver, again, a close battle. Well, what we thought was a close battle in the power spread. Denver clearly showed they're a better team as projected. San Fran will be on the bubble, to use an expression, for making the playoffs. But Denver clearly defined itself as the highest-ranked power spread team. And the reason I keep saying Denver is not going to win the Super Bowl or even probably make the Super Bowl, from my perspective, is they can still be, listen closely, they can still be the highest power-ranked team, but it doesn't mean they're going to win their playoff game. Turnovers or something that happened last year in the Super Bowl, like a snap over Peyton Manning's head, makes a huge difference, and that I don't think Denver has got, to be honest with you, on their side. Houston and Pittsburgh, Houston should have covered this game, just a sort of Pittsburgh home field advantage, and Pittsburgh some other things, and they ended up winning that game, even though we had said Houston. So going into next week now, and this week, Week 8, here's the power spread projections from NFL ESP, coming off the heels of a 4-1, 5-1, 6-2 week based on our top picks last week. All those records can be confirmed. So let's take a look at this week from NFLESP.com, and I'll note again, we didn't do the Thursday night game, San Diego against Denver, so I'm going to start from the top with Detroit against Atlanta, and again with a bent on those who have a mind to invest. This game's in London. Don't agree with games, again, being in London. I mean, I wouldn't play any games there, to be honest with you. I highly doubt, definitely would never have a franchise there. But with no home field advantage, Detroit is basically power ranked here 3.5 or 4 points better than Atlanta. That's just basically a 50-50 game. I think Detroit is definitely the better team than Atlanta, but I'm sure most people are probably going to be investing in Detroit. So I would see Detroit winning that game by exactly 3 points. It all comes down to, turnovers, I guess, in that game. I think Atlanta's going to be really tired. They've done a lot of traveling. I would never invest in Atlanta. It's too close to call. That's a 50-50 game, but I would always lean toward Detroit. Minnesota-Tampa Bay is another close game between two really bad teams. In this situation, Minnesota is power ranked 1 point better, but Tampa is giving 2.5 because they're at home. Tampa is a 3.5 point home team. They do get a lot of beneficial home calls in Tampa, and if Tampa is going to win, it's going to be because of those home calls and turnovers if they can get them, because I'm not sold on Teddy Bridgewater, never have been and never probably will be. Next game is Chicago, as I've talked about, against New England. I didn't hear a lot from Coach this week, just a spiritual note that we had with each other, and I don't think the Bears are going to be as aggressive as they need to be. It's a live power spread for them, but New England is the better team, even though they have injuries, and I still think that game is going to be close in the sense with the power spread, and New England can probably win by anywhere from 7 to 10, or who knows, maybe even as little as 4. It's just too close to call. It's not worth investing in, but if you had to, I just think New England's going to win it straight up. I don't think Chicago can win that game straight up. They're just not on a level with the AFC East, that division. The Rams are playing a Chiefs, same sort of scenario, close game. I think the Rams are, again, underrated by players or teams, and certainly by those who set the line and manipulate it with a desire to win and beat the quote-unquote public. But if this quarterback, Davis, can come around, as I said, Sam Bradford wasn't the best option for the Rams, even before he got hurt, and then after he got hurt, I think they might have found a quarterback. Don't know enough about him, but I will say that that's probably a live number for St. Louis. That they'd be the team to invest in if you had to invest in that game. But again, this is a tough week overall, I'm going to be honest, as far as the power spread goes. But Kansas City, I think, again, the AFC is a better league this year, the AFC West, than the NFC West. But I would say the points there are at a premium, and it appears people are beginning to invest in Kansas City and catch on to them. So I would, again, lean towards St. Louis because fewer people or the public are playing them. Seattle's playing Carolina. I've been in Carolina all year with the points. Seattle is giving 5 to Carolina. That's too many points to give Carolina at home. Again, this will be a close game. Seattle, I believe, is the better team. But again, in a game that's very close, I would take the points here. In the Jets and Bills, same division, probably an even game. The Jets are giving 3, which means they're basically even teams, and the Jets are giving 3 for home. I would lean toward the Jets. I think the pros, quote-unquote pros in that city in Nevada, are leaning toward the Jets. I think they're a few points better than the Bills probably, and you only have to give 3. And if the Jets can just get a decent home call and get turnovers to start turning in their favor, to use an expression, because the Jets are the highest, most negative-ranked team in turnovers in the NFL. Jacksonville's playing Miami. You would want to invest in Jacksonville. The public here, I know, is percentage-wise investing in Miami. I wouldn't personally invest in Jacksonville, but that's the team you would want to if you're investing. Houston's playing Tennessee. Same situation here. Same division teams. Points are a premium. I know the public is percentage-wise investing in Houston. I don't know that they're 6 points better and laying 3, which means they're 6 points better, and Tennessee gets 3 for at home. I would invest in Tennessee if I had to invest. Baltimore's playing Cincinnati again here. Now, here's the only way Cincinnati can win this game is turnovers because they've been negative, or home field calls. That's the only way. Baltimore is 5 points better, is a 5-point better team. The pros looked at it that way. The pro investors, when the line came out, they moved it pretty quickly toward Baltimore's favor. Again, you know how I feel about Cincinnati, or NFL ESP feels about Cincinnati, an overranked team. Again, I would invest in Baltimore here. And the only way, again, you would have to see some very dramatic home calls for Cincinnati and some turnovers for them to end up winning this game. Arizona's playing the Eagles in a game. Arizona's laying 2.5. The NFC West is better than the NFC East. This basically dictates that both teams are ranked even, and Carolina's actually this dictates that Philadelphia is probably ranked a point better, since Arizona is giving 2.5 points at home. And if you give Arizona just 3 points for home or 3.5 for home, I think Arizona's just a 3-point home team though. But Arizona's the better team, so all they need is to not, have any many dramatic turnovers against them, and they should be able to beat Philadelphia. Certainly, it's not a guarantee, but I would lean toward Arizona if I had to invest in that game. Indianapolis is playing Pittsburgh. Indianapolis' power rated 6.5 points better, but they're giving 3 to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is a 3.5-point home team. I do know that the public is investing in Indianapolis, and the spread is 3. So again, understand the math here when I explain this. The home team gets 3 or 3.5 points. So if Indianapolis is laying 3, that means they're basically 6.5 points better, okay, than Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh gets 3 for home, and then the final power spread is Indy minus 3. I would definitely invest in Indy if I had to invest. But again, the public is heavy on Indy. Pittsburgh's a home dog. Indy's covered a lot of games in a row. The public's going to be getting too much behind, and the spread's going to be too inflated. Pittsburgh does get home calls, and they're going to need them against Indy. But I do give one game of the week to the public where they do get to, they do win. They do get it, quote-unquote, right. And I think this will probably be the game that they do get right. Cleveland is playing Oakland. You already heard me mention about Cleveland and Johnny Manziel. Again, this is a game where I so wish they got Johnny in the lineup, and I think you might see that if Oakland ends up upsetting Cleveland, and I think they can, and I think they can keep this power spread close at 6.5 or 7 points. And I think if the Cleveland offense doesn't produce and Hoyer doesn't have a great game, because Cleveland is a good running team, Cleveland could actually win by losing, put it that way. Okay, if they end up losing and they can get Johnny Manziel in that lineup, they'll really streak. But again, this is a game Cleveland should win straight up, but Oakland should cover with the power spread. Already talked a little bit about the NBC Sunday night game, which is New Orleans against Green Bay. The public's investing more in Green Bay. That's only natural. They should. New Orleans is basically a must-win situation, even though they are a public team. They're home. They're definitely a 4-point home team. They're going to get calls at home. If they can get their turnarounds, this is the biggest turnaround ratio game in the NFL this week, meaning that Green Bay has a good positive number. They're plus 21 points this season in turnovers, and I think New Orleans is minus over 30, so that's over a 50-point difference. That's dramatic, meaning this would probably be the kind of game where New Orleans gets, in NFL parlance, plus 2 or plus 3 turnovers, in their favor, and the turnovers will make the difference for New Orleans and they'll end up winning. The final game is Washington against Dallas. If you're investing in the power spread, you've got to take Washington. It's too many points. Dallas, I believe, is clearly the better team, should win the game at home. The officials are going to be on their side on a Monday night in Dallas. You can bet on that. Excuse me, that I hate to use that word, but to coin a phrase or use an expression. But again, I would invest in Washington if I had to invest in a game for them to keep it close. So that's it for NFL ESP Week 8 in the NFL. I know it's a little bit haphazard, rushed through things. I apologize about that. Tried to get a lot in there, got a lot going on, but just wanted to give you some insights, and we'll probably write somewhere, wherever this is posted on the web, the teams that I think have the best chance to win with the power spread. So this is Mark Anthony DeBello. God bless you.